As you can see, I have a large selection of Pathfinder RPG books. I have a large number of the first edition and second edition books at this point, and I know as a newcomer, what really was at the top of my mind was which of these books do I need and which of these books would just be nice to have. So, what I'm going to do today is go over what books are the absolute essentials and then what books are just the nice to haves. So, I'm going to do these in order of what is the most crucial, being the first, and then going down to my top five. One thing that I am not going to get into are the Lost Omens World books. In a later video, I am going to go over those because they are absolutely beautifully written and they will add a ton of flavor and depth to your campaign. But for today, we're just going to stick to the essential rules and what you should buy first. This is the Books, Bricks, and Boards Pathfinder 2E buying guide.
He was a loner. Took off in the middle of the night. Useless scum-lapping shitbag.
Just the facts, ma'am.
This is number one of the GM Essentials for Pathfinder 2E. Of course, like most of the books I'm going to be talking about today, you have a hardback option or a softcover option. I actually have both. I find that these pocket-sized softbacks are much better at the table, while the hardbacks I enjoy for reading and studying whenever I'm not actually running the game. This book's a chunky boy. It is actually comparable to the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide for Dungeons and Dragons. So this is going to have everything that you need to actually run the game outside of the monsters. It's got all your player stuff at the beginning, your ancestries, your backgrounds, your classes, your skills, your feats, your equipment, your spells. It's got a little bit about the Age of Lost Omens, which is the campaign setting. It's got the rules for playing the game. A few tips on game mastering. I'm going to get to that more later in the Game Master Guide section. And crafting and treasure. So it's got a very nice set of items available in the back. And Paizo does an excellent job with their appendices. And they do a very nice brief summary of each term and where to find it in the book. So, well, this is going to be a little bit more expensive if you're coming from Dungeons and Dragons. I think the MSRP on this is around $60 for the hardback, around maybe $35 for the pocket. Of course, you can get that lower if you buy it from an online retailer. Hopefully, you're able to get it from a friendly local game store. But this is going to be your first pickup. And it is, like I said, very chunky. It's over 600 pages, but it is actually not that bad of a read whenever you consider that a good bulk of that are going to be individual classes, which if you have none of those in your party, you don't have to worry about as much. There's a large section on feats. You're not going to be worrying about all the feats right up front. Large section on skills. You're going to kind of take those as you need them, so on and so forth. So the amount of actual reading that you're going to have to do to learn the basics of this game is going to be pretty minimal despite the size of this book. But again, you may balk at the price a little bit right up front because it is more expensive than the Player's Handbook. But when you consider that this is actually the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide for this particular system, it doesn't feel quite so bad. Another thing that I want to bring up, with all of the books that I'm going to talk about today, there is also, because they're part of the Open Gaming License, the actual nuts and bolts of these books are available for free online. I use Archives of Nethys, But the reason I have the books is, number one, it's just nice to have the books and not have to go online to look stuff up. But number two, I want to support Paizo because they do a great job with this game system. So this is the first thing you're going to need to pick up, the Pathfinder Core Rulebook.
Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my!
Lions and tigers and bears.
And here is the second thing you're going to need. You're going to need something for your heroes to fight. You're going to find that in the Pathfinder bestiaries. There are 3 of them currently for Pathfinder 2e. Again, these come in hardback or pocket-sized softbacks. I have the softback here because this is what I use at the table. But you're going to find in the first one, you're going to find all your basic monsters, most of the things that you've become accustomed to playing fantasy RPGs for the last 40 years, you're going to see in this book. You combine this with some of the tools in the game mastery guide that I'm going to go over later, and you can alter these to even better fit your needs. But there is a great variety in here alone. You really have enough monsters to run a very long campaign and not be retreading the same territory for a very long time. Also, I've noticed that in the adventure paths, a lot of times they do not have the stat blocks for the monsters in the adventure path. They do have those monsters in here. So far, the adventure paths that I've looked at, they've only referenced ones from Bestiary 1. So this would be my pickup for a Bestiary. Bestiary 2 and 3 are fine. They have their own focuses. I have both of them, but this is where I would start if I was just coming over from 5e to Pathfinder. One thing that I would note, Pathfinder's stat blocks are very concise. You have lots of traits at the top. These traits can be very important to different skills, feats, and abilities. So you'll want to really pay attention to these. And occasionally, and I don't like this, but occasionally there will be some rules that are specifically associated with a trait. And if you don't know that that particular trait has its own rules, you may be unpleasantly surprised when you miss something. But you'll see the stat blocks. Instead of actual strength stat, it will have just the modifier, which makes that a little bit easier to use at the table. Some common items will have AC, blah, 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 reflexes, all your saving throws, that kind of thing. It's going to have what the reaction ability is. That's what the little arrow means. And then it has a number of their different available actions. So just like the players, they're going to get 3 actions per turn. Just like the players, they're going to get a multi-attack penalty. So this uses the 3-action economy for both enemies and heroes. But there's some really good things in here. My suggestion, before you use one of these monsters, if you know you're going to be running into them in your campaign, definitely look up all of the traits and make sure you know how all the interactions between said traits work with that particular monster. So this is the Bestiary number 1, and it would be the second book that I would pick up as an essential item for a new GM to Pathfinder.
All right. The Princess Bride by S. Morgenstern, Chapter 1.
All right, so this one, it's going to depend on if you like to homebrew or if you like to use pre-made adventures. I would suggest, after you have the core rules and the bestiary, to get an adventure path. I would get the whole adventure path so that you have the ability to continue through and complete the story. And you don't know how easily attainable some of those books are going to be later. For example, this particular one, it was very hard to find book number 3 just a year after it was released. And the other reason why I bring this particular adventure path up, this being the Abomination Vaults, number 1, it's a good starter because it doesn't go off into some very niche territory. It is a dungeon crawl. It is often called a mega dungeon. So people are going to be familiar with the concept. It starts at level 1, goes to level 10. So it's good for a new party, a new starting party. Lets you kind of ease your way into what is in the Pathfinder rule system. And also, this particular adventure path is going to be released as one single book in a couple months. So I'm kind of cheating here because I actually have 3 books for my third insert into the essential books that a GM would need. That being said, you don't have to start with this adventure path. You don't even have to use an adventure path. But Paizo is excellent at creating interesting and very immersive adventure paths, and that is kind of their bread and butter. That's how they got started, was creating adventure paths for Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. So they are still excellent at it. They haven't lost their touch. And this would be where I would start. It is where I am starting my own campaign whenever I start it back up. This is it. So that would be the third thing. Pick up an adventure path. So they're going to have background in here for the area. They all have like suggestions on what levels characters should be at different points in the adventure. There are usually like a gazetteer of the area surrounding the adventure where the players are going to be. There's usually an adventurer's toolbox at the end, which is going to have some interesting things that can be of use to the players. And you're going to get some great encounters. You're going to get some awesome maps. Even if you don't end up playing through a particular adventure path, there's a lot of stuff that you could steal for your own homebrew campaigns in these, and they are excellent. So that's number 3.
Got some wrinkles to the hair repair, change of blood. Added a good 30 to 40 years to my life. They also replaced my spleen and colon.
And here's my number 4. This is the Advanced Player's Guide. The Advanced Player's Guide is going to greatly expand your options from the core rulebook. This is going to add 4 new classes. It adds the Investigator, the Witch. It adds several different archetypes. It adds feats. It adds spells. There's some new items in it. Got some new backgrounds. The Oracle, I was not super excited with. The Swashbuckler, however, is very cool. Also has some new ancestries. The Tengu are one of my favorites. And basically, this is going to be something that, as a GM, you're probably not going to use directly as much. It's more going to be for your players' benefit. However, the feats and items and even the classes can serve as inspiration for some of your enemies, and it just makes the world more fleshed out knowing that these things exist and having the background information for them. I think your players will really appreciate having the extra archetypes, classes, skills, feats, all of that, spells. But this is the Advanced Player's Guide. Of course, as usual, Paizo did an excellent job with the indices at the back. And again, a lot of information. This is, again, the pocket version, the softback. It is less expensive. I have both. This is the one I like to use at the table.
I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, so there is a reason why this is my number 5 for the essential books. Really, the last 2, they're not musts. They are nice to have, but I would buy them before I would expand into any of the more narrow products like the Guns and Gears or the Secrets of Magic. So like I would get the Advanced Player's Guide before I got the Guns and Gears or the Secrets of Magic. But Game Mastery Guide I would also get before getting those. Reason being there are a lot of nifty things to add flavor to your game in here. There is the obligatory section on how to be a good GM. You know, all these types of books and RPGs have them. Got different tables and such that are going to make your game run smoother. There are a number of tools that you can use for creating traps and hazards. There are subsystems for everything from dueling, let's see here, infiltration, hexploration, vehicles. So yeah, there's lots of different things in this book that you may or may not use. These are all optional. And then you have variant rules. You know, you could run this as a Dungeon Crawl Classic funnel and have level 0 characters. One of the popular variant rules is free archetypes. I know that several YouTubers have said that that is the way to go. It adds some variety to the characters. And you get a mini bestiary of NPCs. So if you are needing something to add a quick NPC to your adventure and you hadn't planned out a stat block for them, there are a lot to choose from in here, and they give you some great options to keep your campaign fresh. But between that and the tools and all of that, this is a great book to have. Now, what this is not is a Dungeon Master's Guide. This does not have anything that is absolutely necessary to run the game. It doesn't have the magic items in here. Those are primarily in the core rule book. It doesn't have the encounter building rules. Those are still in the core rule book. So whenever I said earlier that the core rule book really is a combination of the Dungeon Master Guide and the Player's Guide, that was absolutely 100% correct. This goes above and beyond that. It gives you some great tools, subsystems, and NPCs to use in your game. And this is more like a GM cheat sheet for you, or a nice handy at the table, run it on the fly kind of book for you. So this is the Game Mastery Guide, again available in hardback or softback. As always, I prefer these softbacks when I'm playing at the table. Hopefully you enjoyed that video. I gave you my best thoughts on what you absolutely have to run an effective Pathfinder 2e campaign. That being said, if you just want to dip your toes into the water, Paizo does have an excellent beginner box, which has everything you need to get started. And they've actually released a separate standalone adventure called Troubles in Otari that will be playable with that beginner's box. So if you don't want to go full in like I did, you can always start with that and then later on move to the full game. If you are coming from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, this is hopefully going to help you make a decision as to where to start, where to go from there, and what each book serves a purpose to do. That being said, in the future I'm going to do some more videos on some of the other books, because even though these are the essentials, I can't just stick with the essentials, and I bet a lot of you are just like me in that regard. You're probably going to want more and more and more. So later on, I'm going to do some videos on the different Lost Omens world books. I'm also going to do my review of the Absalom, Beetle and Grimm's gold box once it arrives. But if you haven't watched my other Pathfinder video, please take a look through my old videos and take a look at that. If you enjoy watching anything about solo board games or board game reviews, I would encourage you to look at some of those old videos. If you've enjoyed the content, please give me a like and a subscribe. Until next time, I've been Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.